The Beulah Show, a 1950s ABC television sitcom, depicts the everyday life of the white suburban Henderson family and their African-American housekeeper, Beulah. Formal elements of the show render Beulah a subservient, dehumanized, and objectified homemaker, likening her to Rosie, the robot housekeeper of the white outer space living Jetson family of the Jetsons, another 1950s sitcom. The Beulah Show's racial and gender relations consequently serve as a justification for the violent exploitation of Beulah. The Beulah Show uses the mammy stereotype to portray African-American women as capable of taking on more physical labor than other women. Beulah fits the stereotype. The actress playing Beulah is made up to look extremely dark-skinned. Her hair is tied back and she has a large, sturdy physique. Compared to Mrs. Henderson, who is extremely feminine, Beulah does not wear makeup and has loose-fitting clothes. This makes her appear more masculine and implies she can take on physical labor traditionally completed by men. Similarly, Rosie the robot's build imitates that of the mammy stereotype. Although Rosie is animated and not a person, she is still constructed as heavier and less feminine than the French robot who is also presented to Mrs. Jetson. This connects Rosie, a robot, to Beulah, a person, serving to dehumanize and objectify Beulah, underscoring the disrespect she experiences. Beulah is presented in this way because programming networks had to represent African Americans to maximize viewership for marketing purposes, but also could not displease white audiences. In Employment and Blue Pencils, Murray Foreman explains it was difficult for networks to move beyond the African American roles of domestic service because white audiences were offended by the portrayal of black characters. As Lynn Spiegel explains in her article White Flight, television allowed for white people to flee from the reality of multiracial interactions in their day-to-day life to the utopian imaginary places that new technologies offered, spaces where black people barely existed. The Beulah Show exemplifies how for black people to exist in these spaces reserved for exclusively white people, they needed to be domestic servants. Beulah is shown as separate from her white family. When depicted alongside the family, she's always providing a domestic service for them. This shows how the only ground for Beulah's existence within the skated suburban community is her availability to complete any chore at the request of the Hendersons, just like Rosie the robot does for the Jetson family. Mrs. Jetson brings Rosie into her home for a one-day free demonstration during which Rosie must prove herself worthy of being granted access to the family's domestic space through excessive and quality labor. Both Beulah and Rosie complete their tasks with humor and without additional compensation. This suggests that housework is a source of happiness for the women of color they represent. The fact that Beulah appears no different from Rosie serves to justify the exploitation of Beulah's physical labor and consequently the exploitation of African American women more generally. Beulah shows how the experience of being an African American woman cannot be told from a white male screenwriter's perspective. Although Beulah depicts an African American actress on broadcast television, her representation does not actually enhance diversity on screen. As James Poniewozik explains in his article, Empire and Blackish show why diversity needs to be deep, not just broad. Deep racial representation on TV originates from having minority characters talk about race in a way that's not always in relation to white people. Beulah is an example of how the black experience is falsely represented on TV to maintain a social order that reinforces a white heteropatriarchy and ensures that minorities such as African American women remain socially enslaved.